Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping back into some malicious compliance. Before we start, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you stay, there might be some cookies in your near future. Alright, our first story today comes to us from Liberty or Death. Arrogant coach teacher threatened to send me to the principal. I obliged. Let's jump right in. This is over a decade ago. Time is a cruel mistress, so some details are foggy. Going into senior year of high school at a small rural high school where the smart kids all get sent off to the distance learning building their junior year and senior year to take college courses. Junior year, the woman in charge of us in distance learning had been teaching at our school district for 15 plus years. She knew us, our families, taught us in multiple grades, and coached about 3/4 of us in track or tennis. Keep in mind, our entire student body, K-12, wouldn't have broken 500 kids, even if they padded the numbers with voluntary pre-K and GED students. She knew us, our antics, and generally trusted us to get our work done. She made sure we actually watched our classes and didn't get into a bind on our assignments. Outside of that, as long as we were doing something productive and had our main stuff done, our time was ours to use as we saw fit. In my case, it was mostly spent playing guitar and reading up on the playbook for whatever athletic competition I had that week. I was an academically good but insufferably lazy student. Summer passes, first day of senior year comes around, the teacher we all adored had moved away. Her husband got a job elsewhere that paid big money. In her place is some tall red-haired jackbutt none of us have ever seen before. Turns out he's the new head coach for girls basketball and our new distance learning supervisor. Our college courses didn't start for a couple weeks, so he spent the entire first day pontificating on how lucky we all were to have him, since he had spent the last 10 years in the university world and knew how it worked, and would make sure we weren't just slacking off because we were seniors. The fact that he went from university to high school should have been a red flag to the people that hired him. Whatever. A couple weeks go by of this coach, we'll call him Bob, making us do pointless practice assignments like writing a paper on respect in APA format or researching a new car for his wife while citing our sources. All under the guise of making sure we were prepared. The students all politely informed him that these courses were through a community college and were generally no more difficult than a normal AP high school class, except for the STEM courses. Fast forward 2 weeks and courses start. Finally, we thought. Bob's antics throughout the year would have been bearable had he not made a habit of insulting students who did something that wasn't to his liking, or held a political view contrary to the university culture he came from, which was all of us. He went to demanding that we submit all assignments to him before our actual professors, which he then did not go through quickly, causing a great many of us to lose points for late assignments. We started ignoring this and sending him a copy at the same time we submitted the assignment, and telling us all that we were in no way mature enough for this kind of learning. We all had to maintain an institutional GPA of 3.0 or better to stay in the program. We averaged 3.8, and if it was up to him, he'd take our entitled butts right back over to the main building for real classes. The straw that broke the camel's back came at the end of the fall semester. We'd all taken our finals, passed, and were looking forward to an easy few weeks. Bob came in that morning in a worse mood than usual. I found out years later this was the day his divorce proceedings began, and started berating one of the girls for how she was dressed. She ignored him, as did the rest of us. We all were just making it through to the end of the semester. Bob then began one of his speeches about how terrible and entitled we all were. No one was paying attention, which made him even more angry, but he knew he couldn't really punish us for anything. So he zeroed in on one kid that had been placed in the classroom for remedial learning, as it was a quiet, consistent environment. He was the one student in the room actually working on something. The convo, paraphrased as this was over 10 years ago, went as follows. "So, what are you doing?" somewhat rudely, "I'm trying to study for my test coming up so I don't get held back." For what? So you can eventually go flip burgers at the Dairy Queen? Makes a 6-figure income as a welder now? Please, you're not going to get it done anyway, so have some respect and pay attention when an adult is speaking. That was it for me. You see, that student happened to be my cousin. I was intimately familiar with his academic and personal struggles, and knew how hard he was working to straighten up. Our family is a rather well-known and affluent one in our community, and that student was cruelly regarded as a screw-up by some folks outside of our family, despite his overwhelmingly kind disposition. Now, this move-in crapstick was insulting the most vulnerable member of the class and my family. It was time to hurt this guy in the worst way I could think of without hurting myself too badly or getting arrested. You see, my mother had been teaching for 25 years in the district at that point, and my stepfather is a retired guidance counselor, so I knew the rules. I'd previously refrained from honestly discussing his conduct with my parents because Bob's daughter had actually become part of our friend circle, and I knew how hard life would be on her if her dad lost his job, as his reputation made her life hard enough. The college course's kids also did theater and athletics together, so she was part of our life. Again, tiny school, half the varsity offensive line was part of a district-winning production of Flowers for Algernon, and our star running back, also a regional qualifier in robotics. But she was graduating with the rest of us and going to school out of state, so collateral damage would be minimal. Knowing what would happen next, I casually remarked, "Coach Bob, it seems to me that if you knew half as much about basketball as you think you know about this student, you'd probably still have your job at the university, or would have gotten your contract renewed for another year at the last school board meeting. Where will you go after the school year ends?" The room went dead quiet. That info wasn't in the newspaper yet. Bob's face turned an absolutely vibrant shade of red. His voice shaking, he tells me, "Outside, now." I calmly set down my book and stepped out into the foyer of the building. Bob followed me out, closed the door, and proceeded to scream every insult and cuss word he could think of in my face for at least 4 straight minutes. I was the most smug, lazy, entitled little crap he had ever seen, apparently. I may have been able to pull the wool over the eyes of my pastor, every other teacher, his daughter, and all my coaches who were constantly irritated with me for being lazy, but dang it, I couldn't fool him. I was never going anywhere in life, and I was just going to ride my family name like a parasite. To be honest, his lung capacity was kind of impressive. I don't think he took a single breath for the entirety of his rant. Once he stopped to catch his breath, I asked, "Coach Bob, may I go back to reading now?" Bob screamed, "No, your butt is going straight to the principal, and I will write down exactly what you said, and you will sign the darn thing, do you understand?" "Yes, sir, I'd be happy to sign it." Bob gave me a questioning gaze. "Actually, I'd be happy to go down to principal's office. I need to ask him for a letter of recommendation for a scholarship, and of course, he will ask me what led to me saying something so disrespectful. Of course, I can't lie to him, and then I'll mention our little chat out here." By this point, the teacher in the other classroom, who I also happened to be related to, came out to see what the commotion was, and heard at least the tail end of his glorious speech. She was about to say something, but I turned and gave her a smile and wink. I had it in the bag. 18-year-old me was riding high. Bob sent me back into the distance learning room and followed me in. I stood by the door awaiting my office referral. A minute went by and it never came. "Sit down, Jones." "Coach Bob, I believe classroom insubordination requires an office referral." "If that's the way you want to go." Bob's voice started to raise, but at this point he understood his situation. He wrote up the official referral and I walked happily down to the admin office. The principal was surprised to see me, and even more surprised that I was sent there on disciplinary action. I told him what had happened, and I got detention for 1 day as punishment for open disrespect of a teacher, which I kind of deserved, and a thank you for my honesty. The next 2 weeks were heavenly. Bob barely spoke a word and spent most of his time glaring at me or looking at job listings. At the start of the spring semester, he wasn't in distance learning. In fact, he was nowhere to be seen. Turned out, he'd accepted a last-minute opportunity somewhere else before the Christmas break and had to move there in time for spring practices to start. What a coincidence. I found out years later that Bob was soon let go from his next coaching job, and he had gotten divorced. Other faculty had apparently repeatedly complained about his conduct, and he was on incredibly thin ice long before my little stunt. Honestly, I kind of feel sorry for the guy after writing this memory down. Congratulations to everyone that made it to the end. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Sufficient Display. It says, "This is beautiful. Thanks for sticking up for your cousin, especially at 18. OP replied to this comment and said, "He had done the same for me in an even less savory situation once. I mouthed off to a drunk idiot at a dance. Drunk's friends wanted a fight. Cousin rolls up out of nowhere and apparently had a reputation. Drunks went stumbling off into the night without a word. He owns a thriving little welding business now." I completely agree. Congrats to OP for standing up for their cousin. I mean, OP absolutely destroyed Bob and his self-esteem in one sentence. That was absolutely amazing. Our next story today comes to us from Rocketman3487. "You want to fire me in the middle of my shift, but have me stay until the end? Okay, I'll bite." Let's jump right in. About 15 years ago, when I was about 20, I got a job at a new Panera opening in my town. I worked there exactly 5 days. After 2 days of working the salad line and making sandwiches, which was honestly fun, I was told I was being moved to the kitchen. I didn't mind because I love to cook and bake, so I was excited for about a whole minute. When I showed up on my 3rd day, I get walked to the kitchen. I'm so stoked. I stop at the chef line, but the manager keeps walking. I stop at the baker line, but the manager keeps walking. He stops in front of the dishwasher. He says, "I'm gonna be washing dishes for a couple days because they hadn't hired one yet." Or he quit instantly, but I'll never know that. I give it my do best attitude for 2.5 days. It's a darn big pill to swallow. I suddenly realized the back end of a bakery and restaurant to be much harder than I ever thought. And I've worked in the back prior, just not at this level before. So mucho props to all of you back of the house workers. I have always worked counters, even maintenance, but never that hard. And I started to fail because I was feeling dejected and being talked down to. Come my 3rd day on dishes and the last day at Panera, I show up on time and it was a pretty busy night, so there was lots to get to. I try so hard, but by then we're open, so freshly dirty plate tubs are coming back in groves. Starts piling up on the counter, then on the floor. Halfway through my shift, my lunch is late. Before I go to lunch, they pull me into the office and tell me they're letting me go like this. "We're so sorry to say, but we have to let you go. You're just not keeping up. But would you please stay and finish your shift first?" I was floored, but I did it, just not with my do best attitude. I proceed to wash one pan at a time in the industrial washer we have. More tubs are piling up. My coworkers asking what's going on. I explain, and they understand and support thankfully. So even more tubs pile up, now on the floor before I even finish the pans. Come the end of my shift, I knew my managers were going to have to stay and wash the dishes, but they were courteous enough and told me that as a parting gift and thanks for trying, I could take home whatever I wanted from the store. So I did. Over $120 I think in fresh breads and pastries of all delicious varieties. I gave most of it away. Heard from a friend like a year later they were pissed about that for a while but couldn't do anything, which got them even more pissed. It wasn't my finest hour, but I don't regret it one bit. Moral of the story, don't fire your employees mid-shift, but ask them to stay and expect any kind of quality. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Southie, and it's perfect. It says, "Firing you for not keeping up as a dish pig was your giveaway that they had no intention of making you the dishwasher temporarily while they hired a permanent guy. That was you. That was gonna be your full-time permanent position. When you couldn't keep up, they didn't switch you back to what they'd allegedly hired you to do. That was just the bait all along." So to me it sounds like OP actually dodged a bullet, because according to the comment section down below this story, no one really gets promoted out of the dish pit to a better paid or more responsible kitchen position. They're just kept in that job until they get fed up and quit, and then the next person takes over. OP, you seem to be a better person than I am though, because you actually put some items through that industrial washer. I think in my case, I would have been finding random things from around the kitchen to put through there just to see what they look like when they come out the other side. Our last story today comes to us from Boredandsleeps. Scrub the walls of the parking garage with a magic eraser? Okay, see ya in about 6 hours. Let's jump right in. Okay, so this happened about 3 years ago. I was working for a cleaning company in governmental buildings, and FYI, this is a manager that I and plenty of other people had issues with. One day, I went into work like normal. Everything was fine. My manager needed me to do some extra floors to vacuum. Sure, no problem. Told her that I didn't have that many floors to do and could do them after, just needed a list of the floors to vacuum. No argument from her, just an, I'll have it for you after, and off to work I went. About 2 hours go by and I'm done my floors. I go to the office to get a list of the floors she needed me to do, and turns out she needed me to do them early morning, news to me, and ended up sending someone else, and I should have waited. Told her she never said it was time sensitive, otherwise I would have waited. She rolls her eyes and just repeats the same thing, and that I still should have waited, but whatever, what's done is done. And when I ask her if there was anything else that needed to be done, she tells me to grab a bucket, some gloves, and some magic erasers and scrub the walls of the parking garage. There's 5 levels, and I knew that it wasn't part of the contract to clean it. Plus, this was a method she used as a form of punishment for insubordination. She expected me to have it all done by the end of my shift. I grabbed my stuff and did as told, but was only able to clean 1 level. By the end of my shift, I told her, along with my supervisor, that I was only able to do 1 level of the parking garage, and that I would try to get more done tomorrow. Now, my supervisor had no idea that's where I was, since she didn't tell him, and was needed elsewhere for something more important that ended up not being done at all, since no one could find me. Couldn't get a radio, and signal sucks, so there's no texts or calls. He was livid. He asked everyone to leave, and then the very loud argument started. Why would you send her there? It's not even part of our contract. You were warned about pulling this crap on employees. She wasn't fired. 3 strikes and then you're out kind of thing, but with the 2 higher-ups, regional manager and regional supervisor, there with her the next day, was forced to apologize for what she made me do, and wasting my time face to face. My only reply, thank you for your apology, but you didn't waste my time and money. It's the company's time and money that you wasted. Now, unless there's something else, I'll get my floors since I have a busy day of vacuuming. And just left. She hasn't given me any trouble since. Unfortunately, in a lot of jobs, competent management is just really hard to find. But unless it's a safety issue, you should do what they ask, and do it spectacularly. If the boss is bound and determined to suck, help them do it, and you can highlight it for their higher-ups. Check out all 3 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.